And you'll see this is outside of the Tig's house where I stayed. They just stack it up. Now, in my cousin Michael's house, he'd fill it with bags, plastic bags, and then he'd just take one bag into the house to use in the fireplace. Not far from that house is a thing called Dunbrusty, and it's a rock formation. And he used to tell me stories about how they played there as kids, and they would slide down some of these rocks. Now, the town of Clifton in Galway climbed up on top of this high outpost there and shot down. It reminds me of an Austrian village or something. But if you get there, if you go to Ireland, I would recommend you go out to Clifton because it's a beautiful place. And going out further, there's a this place is called the Renville House. I would recommend if you ever get there to stay there. It's in Western Galway. Beautiful, beautiful hotel and restaurant. And the Glens, if you've ever read Sean O'Casey, The Shadow of the Gunman in the Glen and all that. Now, when I got to where look at this view here. This is where my grandmother came from, probably around in the early 1880s. She got married in Holy Rosary Church in North Scranton in 1897. So I was dying, as I said in the beginning, I was dying to find out what is it? What makes these Irish people who they are? So I was staying in a house down below. And this is a very steep, it's only as wide as a small English car. And when you come up there, and then this is a place, this is a road, or a little boreen, as they say, going down into where she came from. Now, if you see the telephone poles there, it was 1969 when all of Ireland was electrified. You know, they just got the electricity out to this remote part of Ireland. And this is the area where she came. There's a part of the ruins of her house down there. And I'll show you. I can see why she left. With this picture here, I have my first impressions of when I got to this place and looked at it. And it's called Shralahi in Irish. It's a land of ruddy land at the bottom. There's a stream that runs down there. I have a quote here. There's no fire like your own fire. And you hear expressions like this all the time. It's amazing. But anyway, Shralahi, on the site of my grandmother's house in County Mayo, Ireland. Only the stones remain, and the wind, the song of the stones, chants an ancient dirge always. There is no translation for the mystery these silent ruins hold. Who laid these stones, plumbed the walls, lit the turf each day? She took her language, walked down this mountain to the sea, and sailed to America, never returned. And I had made 16 trips to Ireland in my brief time here. You know, she was never able to get back. But what I grew up with was my mother sending clothes and things like that, small packages to these people who were out in the country. This man here, and again, he's a poor farmer, lived right there on that mountain, that house that had the smoke coming out of it, Paddy Healy. And when I first met him, we started talking, and he launched into poetry that he had memorized as a kid going to school. It was amazing that out in the wild area like this, and he's reciting poetry. This would be the ruins of the cabin that my grandmother lived. Now, when Connor, my son, well, first my daughter went with me, Maureen. She was 7. A few years later, when Connor was 8, we went. And there's a place in County Mayo that's called Ellie Bay, and they loved it. This past October, we went back, and we called it the Return to Childhood Tour. So when we got to Ellie Bay, they went crazy, and they went out wading in the Atlantic there. The beaches in Ireland are absolutely beautiful, but I don't know how they swim and work there. This is at the bottom. Where we were before was at the top of the hill. You can see it on your left. That's where I was at my grandmother's place on the top of there. Some more beaches, and this is at my cousin Michael's house. The ironic thing here is this picture was taken about 11 o'clock at night. If you go to Ireland, right around the solstice, the summer solstice, a week before, then several weeks after, it doesn't get dark until like midnight, and it doesn't really get black. It's a weird sensation coming from Scranton to people are still out working the hay in the fields at that hour. This is a view looking down from my cousin Michael's house, and then walking over to, oh, there she is. But it's amazing when it's wide open. You can go onto people's property and nobody does anything. Right down from there is the town of Belderg. I don't have a map of it here, but if you go to Ballina, Ballina is the sister city of Scranton, and you take the coast road from Ballina, Killala, Ballycastle, Belderg. This is a fishing village of Belderg. And the fisherman there, talking to Connor, was a cousin of mine. He was born in 1900 and he died in 1998. He wanted to be 100, but he didn't make it. He saw Halley's Comet twice. He fought in the IRA in the War of Independence in the 20s. And he told me back in around 1970 when they were getting ready to join the common market, he said he fought for this Constitution and it was killing him that they were going to do this because he said they're going to have to change the Constitution. People are going to dictate what we're going to have to do, and look at what happened now. The common market has taken over and told them exactly what they have to do to pay back the thing. But anyway, he was a folklorist. He spoke Irish. In 1906, he and his brother Martin and his father went to Dublin, and they won the All-Ireland Irish-Speaking Contest, Inter-Family Irish-Speaking Contest. He has 5 books in University College in Dublin on folklore. People came around in the 50s trying to collect all these stories, and he had them all in Irish. But he was a great man, and he still influences me. So the little village he came from was called Giveron, and I wrote this thing called Beyond in Giveron for Michael Nocton. There's a man over beyond in Giveron, and those times I spent there, on my oath, the wind screamed and ran around the house like a cross child in the shop. The weather is fierce, said he, and his gale-force laughter whirled in fairy rings of color beyond the skies, fields, and seas. Textured colors, soft as the air on Nolan's whistle, wild as the decorated notes on O'Conning's pipes. And in the reflections of the shadows from his fire, an ancient music echoed and fixed upon my mind the appearances of mountains and rivers. And many times have I traveled the road from Ballycastle to Belderg, and if ever I stopped to gaze and write a verse or two in praise of Caja or the stags, I cannot say, for they are just whispers of nervous altar boys, pale words in the powerful presence of the man I know beyond in Giveron.